Welcome to Winner on Wednesday. My name is Juan Vitas, and the purpose we here is to simply get to know each other. I always say people do business with who they know, like, and trust. Speaking of knowing, liking, and trusting, I would like to introduce my longtime friend, Ellen Williams. Ellen, how are you? Please introduce yourself.
I am great and very happy to be here. I'm Ellen Williams. I am the CEO of the Salient Strategist and host of Time to Press Pause, a podcast for CEOs by CEOs. And my mission is to get CEOs out of the weeds and empower their initiative teams with the right processes and the right tools for success.
Excellent. And I can't wait to go into that into more depth. So take us way back. Take us where it all got started. Where did it all began? Tell us about.
Oh, where did it get started? So I grew up in Massachusetts, but I was born on January 1st in Cranston, Rhode Island, and made the first of the year that year. Because Cranston is a small town and Rhode Island is a small state. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Yeah.
was raised in Massachusetts and uh, spent a lot of time in the band and in ballet. So I was a saxophone player and I wound up a soloist with the State Ballet of Rhode Island.
Oh wow.
And yeah, graduated high school a year early so that I could get my butt to New York and give it a whirl in the dance world.
Oh wow. I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you were a dancer. Wow, that's pretty cool. And I didn't know Rhode Island. So how long did you were you in Rhode Island? Like Boston area, Rhode Island.
So I moved to New York about 30 days after I turned 18.
Oh wow.
Yes, yes, my
So
parents were very supportive,
yeah.
though a little sad. And we took the Amtrak and they dropped me off and they got back on the train and I'm still here.
Wow, wow. Transit, that was amazing. I visited Rhode Island before, the Breakers. I remember the Breakers. So that's
Sure.
really nice around, very beautiful by the way, but that whole historical, pretty
Yeah,
nice,
it's a
very
lot of
nice.
history up
A
there.
lot a
It's,
lot of history.
been
Yeah.
around a
And
long time. Well, at least for the United States, it's been around a long time compared to the rest of the world, maybe not so much.
right, right. And of course, I've been to Boston numerous of times, and I used to do consulting many years ago with a Boston company, believe it or not. So in Billerica, actually, Billerica, Massachusetts, I used to work for. But that was, many another life, another lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
hear you.
the best trip for me was 4 hours, I think, 4.5 hours or 4 hours. I think it just took me from going to Boston to Long Island here to New York City.
Yeah.
Four
Yeah.
hours.
Depending on traffic, you gotta
Yep.
love 95, right?
Right, exactly, the 95. So tell us about did you have any inspirations of what you wanted to become as a kid, or did you have like any, what did you any ideas? Because we all have different ideas, right? I wanted to become a veterinarian and doctor, but when I found out there was too much schooling, I said, yeah, this is not for me. So any inspirations that you had when you were younger?
Absolutely. I came to New York to be a Broadway dancer.
Wow, look at
That,
that.
that was it. I wanted to be on Broadway. My idols were, Liza Minnelli and um, Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire, of course.
Of
And
course, yeah. Wow.
so I came here and, did a bunch of auditions. I wound up taking classes down in the village, and the instructor there put together a small dance troupe. So I co-produced a small dance troupe for about a year and a half in the village. We had a couple performances that were just a blast, but wasn't really getting picked at the auditions. And one of the women I was dancing with, she worked at Broadway Video. Now, Broadway Video is the production and post-production house owned by Lauren Michaels. So Broadway Video produced Saturday Night Live. And so at the end of all those movies where you see the spinning thing with the big V, Broadway Video. So
Wow.
she worked there and she hired me to take over for the receptionist because the receptionist was taking a sabbatical and going to England, where she had previously lived for like 2 months. So I revamped all the processes and had to retrain the receptionist when she came back. And they said, you know what, we're gonna get a job for you upstairs. So I went from the production portion of Broadway Video up to the post-production portion and worked there. Learned a lot about video editing in a time when MTV was just starting and all these different effects were just starting, and worked my way up from that part-time receptionist to the executive assistant to the vice president.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Amazing.
And then
And
they put a computer on my desk and they said, learn it.
wow.
And, 30 odd years later, I'm still in technology.
Wow, that's it's truly amazing. And so tell us about, was that your first job? Like your would you say your first real job
That was
experience?
my first corporate job for sure.
Corporate,
Broadway
yeah.
Video.
Broadway
Yeah.
video. Wow. And then from that, tell us about your journey from where from there and to what you're doing now. Just I mean, and tell us about that.
Sure. Well, so I learned the computer. Back then it was Lotus 123.
Oh
And
yes.
they handed you this 3-ring binder and said, here's the manual that was written by the programmers. So no one really could figure it out. And people would walk by and say, hey, do you know how to do this? And hey, do you know how to do that? And I would get little tips and tricks. And I got this little keyboard shortcut.
Mm.
And so when I left Broadway Video, I went to interviews, and I was with a interior design firm, and he said, oh, do you know how to use a computer? And I said, yes, which most people didn't. And he was like, really, get into Lotus 123. And I was like, all right. And he's like, all right, get out. And I did my little keyboard thing. And he was like, wait, what did you just do? So I was able to teach him something. So of course I got that job. And it just, a couple years here, a couple years there, I had a bunch of different industries that I worked for, but each one of them continued to grow on the knowledge I had of technology from the previous one. And then I got pregnant,
Oh
and
wow.
it was time to, be a mom.
Mm.
And when I was ready to go back into the workforce, it was self-employment. So it was the fact that I had my first child that really made me an entrepreneur. And I did bookkeeping, and I started putting everyone's books on Quicken, and I started making friends with accountants who were like, you can do what? So it just continued to grow from there.
Oh wow. It's pretty amazing how like your journey that you went for a dancing, right? You were a dancer, and then you got to meet a lot of these great people. You got to network, right? You got to meet a lot of these great people, and then now you doing with this. And the cool thing, what I like about the story, your story, was that the hack. You had all these like great hacks and stuff like that that people looked up to. Like, oh, like, let me see that, and you bring value with that. You actually bring value. People look up to you with that when because you know knowledge. And people listen. Let's face it, people are not motivated, but the fact that you're very motivated is truly amazing. So wow, that's thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah. That's a
yeah,
good
the
story.
origin
The
story.
origin stories, yeah. So, is there any piece of, I like to call this the golden nugget moment where any piece of information you'd like to behind that could better somebody their career or be a better business person or be a better person overall? Any piece of information you'd like to leave behind in the golden nugget moment?
Sure. Always keep learning. I continuously learn from the people I worked with. Like I said, people would come over and say, hey, do you know how to do this? I started taking, within the last 10 years or so, a lot of online courses. I've gotten a few certificates. I've gotten a few certifications. And especially in the world of technology, things are always changing. Some things stay the same, but some things really evolve. And I needed to stay relevant. So if you want to stay relevant and you want to, as you said, bring value, you have to always keep learning. Be open for conversations with people, especially when you're out networking. Be inquisitive, learn what people are doing, learn what makes them different. And it just continues to enrich your life. And who knows, you might learn something that'll make you, the most interesting person at the next party you went to. I have an interesting networking story. I just
Sure.
thought of this. This was years ago, and I had been given the advice, when you go networking, don't approach two people because they're in conversation. Approach when there's three people, because there's always someone that's kind of left out of the conversation, and that person will make eye contact with you and you can start a new conversation. And I told this to this woman. It was a networking event. We were up in a building somewhere pretty high up, and there was a balcony, and it was beautiful in Manhattan. And this woman was dressed all in green. Now, I don't remember if it was St. Patrick's Day or what, but she stood out in the crowd. So I mentioned this to her, and an hour later, I'm roaming around and I go out on the balcony, and there she is, surrounded by all these younger people, touting the best way to network is to approach three, don't it, like giving my advice away. And I just started laughing. I'm like, well, she did a better job networking that
Hmm.
night than I did, because she had this crowd around her. But it was just funny that she immediately put into practice something she learned that evening.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You say that because I've learned of heard or what I've read also is that when there are two people talking, look at their feet. Look at their feet. If they're both of their feet are parallel to each other, so this side is the same matching the other side, they're in deep conversation. They're really connecting. But if their feet are like this and they're like both sideways, they're not each other, just next to each other. You could go in and interrupt them because they're not engaged in the conversation. Because like you and I right now, like say if you were in real life, so you and I are looking at each other. But if we were side to side, it's not really an engagement, so that you can kind of quote unquote interrupt because it's less it's not you're not interrupted, but you shouldn't interrupt somebody when they're look at their feet. Next time, look at their feet.
That's great. See, learned something today, right?
Well,
Learning from you.
and I think this is the whole thing about is the segment about the golden nugget is just to give the valuable piece of behind because we didn't all learn this. We learn from each other. So the fact that you're letting us, and the beauty about this is that we're leaving a legacy behind so that people could rewatch this over and over because we didn't have this when I started my business. Imagine if we had this and started my business, all this information that we have now, I would have, where we would be. But speaking of which, I want to share the story about you and I. We met through Constant Contact. I remember where you had an opportunity where I had to present at that center, entrepreneurial center. So that was really nice of you, and I never forgotten about that. And I just wanted to say thank you for that. And I never forget. I'm always thankful for people that have helped me along my way, and it's always like paying it forward. So I was very happy that you accepted this interview.
Well, it was my pleasure back then. Working at Constant Contact really was an amazing job because it gave me a platform to offer
Hmm.
to the local speakers, and it was very rewarding. And I had a chance to meet a lot of great people such as yourself and really learn from them then. I'm learning from you now. So it was my pleasure, and thank you for being not only a great speaker but a wonderful friend since.
Oh, absolutely. And it's all about networking. Speaking of networking, can you tell us about some networking groups that you belong or organizations or any spheres of influence that you would like to mention?
Well, sure. I don't do a lot of networking. I've been employed with an organization for the last 6 years. So the Salient Strategist is relatively new, jumping back into the entrepreneur pool. But I have been a member of Adrian's Network, which is a
Yes.
networking group out on Long Island.
Hmm.
What really was unique about that is many years ago, like might be 20, when she started, it was virtual before there was Zoom. It was on a conference call. So her concept was, I don't want to spend all day networking. How can I do this more efficiently? So she had these conference calls, and then you hung up, and lo and behold, you were still in your office, which is, I know what happens now on your Winning on Wednesdays and all these Zooms where you can network and meet great people. And when it's over, you can get right back to work. So there's a lot of value of in person, but there's a lot of value for the virtual networking as well. And the only other group I'm in right now is the ISSP, which is the International Society of Sustainability Professionals. So I am a Sustainability Excellence Associate, an SEA. Yeah, certified. Got to keep learning, right? Certified in the first level of sustainability. So I am a member of that group. It's been a passion for many years. When I started my last role at Orion Global Solutions, I jumped into their sustainability concepts and helped grow that part of their business. But it really was, I mean, I was raised by parents who grew up during the Depression. So they really made sure we got the most out of everything. And, you know, sustainability back then was leftovers and hand-me-downs, right?
Mhm. Wow. Well, by the way, Adrian, great person. I actually was a member until when you start your own network, it's like you have to focus on your own network. So I just kind of stopped by, but I used to be BNI. But I always highly recommended to people to Adrian. She's a great person and a great friend. And I just spoke to her last week, just so it's nice that we could keep that rapport, and it's really nice. It's she always gives me great advice. She's a wonderful person, so I highly recommend. I second that. So.
Yeah, it's all
Uh,
about networking,
it's all
right?
about networking and yeah, absolutely. So tell us a bit about about the Salient. Tell us about the new company that you started, the launch. So tell us a little bit about that and what you offer and services and some examples.
Sure, excellent. Thank you. So the Salient Strategist, as I said, my mission is to get the CEOs out of the weeds and to empower the initiative teams with the right processes and right tools for success. And I take the 30 years of experience I have, so all the services really do revolve around technology. For example, if there's an organization with a legacy system and it's time for a new one, number one, that can be very disruptive. Number two, you don't want the CEO too far in the weeds there because, they got to do CEO stuff. And number three, the team that's going to be running that initiative may or may not have experience, and certainly they all have day jobs. So my services come in and get the CEO out of the weeds, review the process that the initiative team is using to make the selection of the new technology, and then give them the tools by which they can make that selection. So I've done everything from helping with requests for proposals to working with the vendors, getting the responses, doing some analysis, scheduling the vendor demos, and then just supporting the decision that the organization makes on how they want to move forward. And it's really, it's important to do it right, but it's also really rewarding for me because I think when CEOs get to be CEOs and they don't get involved in areas of the organization that they truly have hired people to do those things, the whole organization gets better. So by strengthening the team, putting together a process by which they can repeat the next time, potentially without me, I'm empowering the team. I'm showing the CEO that there's trust there so that the CEO can do uniquely what's required of a CEO, and the organization can run and benefit from that.
Got it. It kind of reminds me of this time that I used to work for this other company. We used to do a legacy convergence and I'm gonna geek people out, so please bear in mind if I wanted the PSTN to do conversion to VoIP, to the internet phone systems, and the old copper going to the internet, and that was a whole big thing, and the conversion and doing that process. Can you let me know what industries have you serviced or have you ever experienced with this? So just get a general idea of what the service kind of, to get an idea of the.
Sure.
Mhm.
Typically, either services industries, like accounting and legal, or consultants. High-tech industries, I have a lot of experience working with all different types of high-tech industries, including Constant Contact, where although my role there was to do the seminars that you and I spoke about,
Right.
I also got very involved with their implementation of Salesforce and really helped create the documentation around what my team needed from Salesforce. And funny enough, construction. I have a lot of background in the construction industry as
Oh,
far as the tools that are available for running a construction organization.
And this is the reason why I asked, because as you're mentioning all the services you mentioned, in my mind, I'm thinking, who could I connect it with? And you just mentioned construction. A couple months ago, I interviewed Yesenia Bell. She's the New York president for the women chapter for women in construction. So that's a big group that it's growing, and it's amazing that women are definitely getting in the role of when normally it was traditional men. It's very nice to see women who are architectures, women who are developers, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool, and they're driving that initiative. So it'd be my pleasure to make those connections for you. Let's see, this is what it's all about.
Fabulous. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
had
excellent.
GCs, I've had plumbers, I've had
Hmm.
electricians, and engineering have all been customers of mine.
Another one, if you really want to get into that area, I mean, there's so many groups, organizations out there that my people who have been on the show, like for example, Eric Alexander for Vision Long Island. I'm sure you heard of Vision Long Island. They see the orification and beautification of Long Island. A lot of developers there, so. They have over 1,000 people at the Crest Hollow Country Club, and it's a lot of contractors, general contractors, big developers who have these contracts for municipalities, and it's nice because it shows you what's going in your neighborhood, what's happening in the development with the construction. So it's nice to see whether it be the railroad station being developed or being developed, or your pavement streets, or it's pretty cool. It's the storefronts as well, the beautification, downtown beautification. So there's a lot of development going on. So it's pretty cool. And again, it'd be my pleasure to make those connections work, make them work. Um, thank you again for sharing your story. What's the best way to get in contact with you, by the way?
Well, you can always find me on LinkedIn, right? Ellen Williams. And the website is the salientstrategist.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being on the show. And if you'd like to be a member of Winning on Wednesday, simply go to our website, www.winningonwednesday.com, and sign up as a first time guest. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.